Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our cycle of webinars. Today it's our second appointment. As you might remember from last week, we discussed topics such as the Italian Startup Act, the Smart and Start Italia program, and the SME Instrument program. Today, the topic treated is quite different. The reason why we're here with Marco Cantamessa, who's the president of the Italian Association for Startups and University Incubators, Claudio Giuliano, who's the president of the Commission for Venture Capital Funds from the Italian Association for Venture Capital and Private Equity, and other guests that will soon be present, is that we want to get you to know the main players from the Italian ecosystem. We want you to get to know the guys who, more than any other, are able to shape the development of our startup ecosystem and to affect policymaker decisions. And we consider these people to be the ones who you cannot deal with startups in Italy without getting to know them. So I'll leave the stage to Marco again, who is the president of PNI Cube, that is the Association for University Incubators and startups. Just a slight methodological note before starting. The first intervention will be by Marco, the second one by Claudio, as I said before, the third from Paolo Anselmo, who's the president of the Italian Business Angels Association, and the fourth by Fabio Conicella from the Italian Association for Technology and Science Parks. How are we going to interact? In case you have questions, just after each session, please take notice of the kind of questions you'd like to know, and we are going to interact with our speakers. So Marco now will have a speech for about 20 minutes, I guess. Yes. After that, you can make the questions directly to him. At the very end of the whole process, there will be more space for questions and answers, so don't worry. If you forget something, just write it down and you'll be able to ask for it later on. A very last point, all the slides show presentations that are going to be shown today on your screens, are going to be shared after webinar via email. And in addition, should anything happen, like your house is getting on fire or anything like that, don't worry, we are going to record the sessions, and the recordings will be sent to you in the next few weeks or months. We'll see, according to our ability to develop the tapes. That's it. So we have a chat. Should you have any questions, just type it, and I'm going to take note of it, and we are going to forward them to the speakers. Thank you in advance for your attention. Let's start. Marco.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mattia, for the invitation, and thanks to everybody for being here at the webinar, with the hope that we will soon find a way to actually meet each other. So the first slide is something that you all know already, but just a very quick recap of the fact that 4 years ago we had this big push by the Italian government to actually create what we call the Startup Act, which means something that not only gave a big push to the Italian ecosystem, but also gave visibility to it. So basically, what are the main tenets of this act? An official recognition and definition of what a startup is and what an incubator is. A lot less red tape, starting from when you found the company, you incorporate it, all the way to its eventual closure or success. Flexibility in labor contracts, incentives for investment, fast-track startup visas, of course, and then some government money going into funds of funds and also into matching funds, and more is to come. So basically, in a very, let's say, frank way, if you give a look at the Italian Startup Visa, it's basically saying a lot of things that Italy is, say, thought of that are negative in the sense of business friendliness, let's take them away, because startups, we want to treat them in a fair way. So this is very important, that you approach Italy without a preconception that Italy is a place full of red tape, that Italy is a place where labor laws are very rigid, because basically this is not true, especially for startups. Okay, that said, what has happened in these 4 years? Well, basically that the ecosystem has taken shape, And you bet, what has happened is that you have startups all over the place, all over the regions, because Italy is a very entrepreneurial country after all. But at the same time, as you might expect, you also find startups coalescing into major hubs. Because of course we know that startups will never be a flat phenomenon spread throughout the country. So you have startups being born all over the place, but then they tend to be attracted in a few sort of, we call them hubs. One of them, of course, is Milan, the second one is Rome, then there's Torino, and then all the rest that are actually going down. And then you have a very important presence as well in the region of Emilia-Romagna, which is a very special kind of place for startups. The interesting thing, if you give a look, is that the first three provinces, Milan, Rome, and Torino, make 28% of the startups in the country. Now, be sure that to have 28% of anything in Italy concentrated in three places, that's magic. It really means that, yes, the ecosystem is really taking shape in a way that is normal with respect to what happens in all the rest of the world. So the question is, what is the features of Italy? Why should somebody actually think about launching a startup in Italy? Or even, let's say more interesting, why should somebody think about coming to Italy to set up a startup? Well, there are a number of reasons, and I'll tell you the reasons that I see, especially coming from a university background. The first one is that technical competencies are strong and they're also fairly cheap. We always see that many of our graduates graduate in Italy and then leave for places all over the world, but even in many major startup hubs that you all know of, and they have fantastic careers there. Now, the interesting point is that whenever an Italian graduate goes to Silicon Valley, he gets a Silicon Valley salary, which is a lot of money. If the same person is being employed in Italy, that might be something like 1/4 of the salary. So the aspect is that the competencies are here and they're fairly cheap, and the reason is why. Now, the first reason is that Italian universities have a very high scientific productivity. If you give a look at the Italian universities' output, like citations and papers, and you divide it by the number of money, the amount of money that goes in there, you see that you get a lot of bang for the buck. The idea is that Italian universities are relatively underfunded, but the people still manage to get things up and running, and they are able to make ends meet. Now, take the same PhD student who managed to run interesting experiments on a shoestring, and take the same person in a startup. Well, that's the kind of effect that you actually start seeing, and that's an important element. The same thing happens if you give a look. This one here was articles per $1 million, and this is articles per researcher. You see Italy is at the top of the rank. It's people who are able to do a lot of work, high quality work, without actually having to be paid too much. And this is citations per researcher. Again, Italy is at the top of the rank. The interesting thing is that the stats that are coming here are not coming out of Italian research, but they're coming out of a report that was commissioned by the UK Ministry of Research to benchmark the UK against the rest of the world. So we're very happy that other people actually said we're not bad. There's another element which is quite interesting, which is that all this graduate talent that we have in Italy is relatively underutilized because the Italian companies, of course, do hire the graduates, but not so much, especially because we have a lot of very small companies who probably are not even actually able to think about what to do with a graduate. What's the message here is that if you give a look at the earnings premiums, which means the difference between the salary that goes to somebody who does not have a degree and the salary that goes to somebody that has a degree, you see that the gap in Italy is relatively low. The message is, if you come to Italy and hire a graduate, that person will probably not expect such a huge salary as it would be in other places of the world, because there's not so much demand after all. So this is a very important message to all entrepreneurs who want to look for talent. Talent here is plentiful, it's good, take it here before it leaves, and then when you have to tap into that same talent in other parts of the world, well, you will have to pay very dearly for that. Okay, there's another thing which is quite interesting. It's also a country that still has a very significant competitive advantage when it comes to engineering and manufacturing. Not many people know about it, but we are immediately after Germany. If you look at countries that are exporters in manufacturing. Of course, everybody knows about Germany. Italy is just in the second place. And all this capability is spread around this number of small and medium-sized companies that dot the landscape. What's the implication here for somebody who wants to make a startup? Well, the point is that if you want to come here with a patent and you want to develop a prototype and then you want to move to production, you probably will not have to raise money to build a factory because the factory is already there. You simply have to tap into this competency and you find the supply chains already there. The example that you see there shows an energy-saving device from an Italian startup that has both a side that has to do with pneumatics, which is mechanical engineering, and another side, you see the black stuff that you see on the right, it's basically a Wi-Fi module to make telemetry possible. Now this device is quite interesting because it's a very complicated thing that melds together, let's say, manufacturing engineering, mechanical engineering, and IT. And, well, you know, it was developed based on a patent with about 300,000 euros of business angel money. And with that money, they made a prototype and they went immediately to production without any further investment. Because the idea was, well, the factory's there, they can do it for us. Trying to replicate the same thing in other parts of the world, not easy, because you probably would have to raise 2, 3, 5, 4 million, or whatever it is, to build a factory, and this was not the case here. The interesting point is that all this capability of making goods is very interesting right now because, you know, bits and atoms are coming together. Whenever you're talking about what's the next big thing, it's not only pure digital, it's digital coming together with physical stuff, which may be anything like Internet of Things, self-driving cars, robotics, you just name it. As a matter of fact, if you look at all the pictures that you see there, the photographs that you see on the slide, there's a company that is behind all that, and it's called Google. So it's really the, let's say, the demonstration that digital is moving towards manufacturing, and sometimes, like in Google's case, they even had to sort of retract from these industries because many of these projects have been sold now because of the difficulty of moving from digital to manufacturing real, hard-made stuff. So the point is, whenever you're moving into that field, you really have to do something that requires competencies that are not easy to replicate. And the same thing happens for medtech, and the same thing happens for clean tech, and so on. So, and of course, not to mention other things for which Italy is even more known, which is food, fashion, furniture, tourism, and all these industries. So definitely, if you want to innovate in these fields, the major players in the world can actually be found here. So it's a very good place to actually come to. Coming to the role of universities, which could be the interesting point, since I'm here to represent PNI Cube, we're the Italian Association of University Business Incubators and also of business plan competitions, which are a major element of what we do. We have been around since 12 years, and the mission is to promote the development of new innovative companies that work together with academic research. Now, if you think about universities incubators, you would usually think about the usual university spin-off, which means professor makes a beautiful invention, files a patent, gets a license, and creates a spin-off. Now, the interesting point is that only part of our startups are actually coming from there, and they're the ones that you see here, the academic spin-offs. But we also have a lot of academics, of spin-offs from the academic community at large. Just imagine young IT graduates making apps. We also have these in our incubators. We also have external startups that want to be linked to university. What are these companies? These are entrepreneurs who have a very clear business idea. They also probably know how to develop the business, but they need to tap into the technical talent that is in the university. So it's the opposite of a spin-off. In a spin-off, you see researchers becoming entrepreneurs or meeting entrepreneurship. And in these kind of startups, you actually see entrepreneurs that meet research. And we're perfectly proud of them in the same way as we're proud of our spin-offs. We also have some corporate spin-offs that are being hosted. And of course, we love to have foreign startups that want to touch base in Italy and want to set up something close to the university. It doesn't have to be the entire startup. It can also be a unit of a startup that wants to do technical development, business development, or whatever. We're very open to all of this. If you give a look at statistics, about 20-25% of Italian startups have in some way been nurtured by universities, either as research spin-offs and or as startups being incubated by members of PNI Cube as an association. So which is a fairly high number, which means that we're looking after, let's say, a sizable portion of the startups that happen to be in the country. Not only that, but about half of the incubators that have been certified, thanks to this law, have an organic or very strong affiliation with the university, which means that the university is punching quite high in this game. To date, the association is formed by 41 members and 18 active StartCups, which means we're covering basically the whole country. It's quite interesting that if you look at the grassroots activity that we're making, it's all spread around the territory. So the idea is that entrepreneurial ideas and talents are about everywhere, and then they will probably go into a hub later on. And we cover the entire country, which also means to allow synergies with local know-how. So for instance, if you want to develop a startup in food tech that has to do with grain, well, you don't want to go to Milan there. You can go to Foggia, which is a very beautiful place where they have this kind of specialty. If you want to develop medical technologies, well, Mirandola is a very beautiful district where they are able to cluster all these companies and make them grow very well. So local specialties are something that we're able to tap into because we have universities being spread in the territory. And the last point, which is quite interesting, is that we run this big business plan competition called StartCups at regional level and Premio Nazionale Innovazione, or National Innovation Prize at national level, that involves more than 3,000 applicants every year, which means this is the biggest business plan competition that we actually have in the country. What can incubators do in universities? Well, let's say the landscape is relatively varied, and it basically depends on the size of the university. Let's say that we can have 3 different models. In the smaller universities, usually it's an incubation service that is being provided by an office of the university, and usually the services are, let's say, not so sophisticated, but definitely the connection with the local territory is there. Then we have non-profit companies that are owned by public bodies, which are affiliated with the university, and that is something where we have, let's say, quite an important role because we're very well ranked in international rankings for university incubators. But then we also have some profit-making companies that are privately owned, but they have some kind of affiliation to the university as well. So we have a mixture of pure public or public-private initiatives around. So you can basically be spoiled for choice. What is the basic process that we all do give? Well, I'll try to give you the benchmark, which is the one that is given by the big incubators, and it's the full process that we will probably find in any kind of university incubator or private incubator around the world. So first of all, scouting, which means a lot of one-to-one contacts, a lot of events, hackathons, business plan competitions, and so forth. We give consultancy. The consultancy we give usually is looking at the strategy part, but then we have all sorts of lawyers, accountants, patent attorneys, and so on that give the specialist consultancy that is needed to actually grow the company. We do a lot of talent management, which basically means looking into matching the talent that is already in the startup with the talent that is missing, and we try to be like a sort of a meetup for startups, if you allow me this sort of comparison. We're also fairly active in fundraising. Now, fundraising is interesting because we work with business angels, we work with venture capital funds. We also work with corporate investors. There's quite an active scene in Italy about medium-sized entrepreneurs who are doing corporate venturing without actually giving the name, but they simply do it. And again, it's the connection between the startup and the local competencies that are on the field. And we also support them in business development. Both on a local basis by attracting companies. So we have the classical demo days, but we also have tailor-made events for large corporations, and internationalization by having a lot of soft landing agreements with incubators around Europe and also beyond. And of course, we're also trying to give, this is a relatively new addition, investor support, which means advisory and board representation to people who want to invest in startups but don't actually have the time to actually do it. So this was basically it. I was very fast, hopefully, or not too fast. And well, the basic idea is arrivederci in Italia. So come and visit us, because whatever we're able to do business with you, it will all be of added value for both the Italian system, but of course to all the people who want to do business with us.
Perfect. Apparently our startup visa holders today look to be a little bit shy. So while we wait for the questions to come, I would like to make a couple of ones. So the first one is just very simply, where are the online places, resources where to find the list and the localization of and the names of university incubators and StartCups, and what's exactly the difference between like StartCups and the National Innovation Prize?
Okay. Well, you can do it this way. You can either go to the website of PNI Cube, pnicube.it, or you can simply go the other way around, which is start from the university you think could have the right talent and competencies, because you probably know about it, it's famous, and try to see what are the incubation services in there. These are the two ways with which you could do it. The other thing that the other question was about the difference between the StartCup and Premio Innovazione. Okay, so basically, StartCups are regional business plan competitions, and we have them in all the different regions. And of course, they also have a different size. Some regions are bigger and some regions are smaller. What happens then is that each of the regional universities that run a StartCup then have some winners, and they send the winners to the National Innovation Prize. So it's like having sort of a regional competition and then the national competition that brings together the best of the different regions. And this is a very, let's say, highly visible kind of thing. It has a lot of sponsors, it has visibility on the media and so on. So it's something that, let's say, startups love to take part to, not only because of the competition and the prizes, but especially because of the visibility. Tomorrow we will actually go to the Quirinale, which is the place where we have the head of state, and he will shake hands with winners of last year's prizes. So it's always something that people like to have because of this, let's say, media impact.
Thank you. So we have the first two questions from a startup visa holder, Stephanie Mitchell, who is currently based at H Farm, not far from Venice. So the first question is, what's the best way for a startup like mine to find talent in university? I'm looking for developers. Okay, now I would put it this way. Don't only look for developers in the university, because we always have quite good developers that probably have dropped out and are making a living as developers. If you want to go to university, I think the best way is to do it, I would say, either formally, which is go to the job placement office of the university and try to post your, let's say, offer. And the offer can be an internship, and after the internship can come a contract, of course. And generally speaking, the students in IT that are working and want to have a career there are quite, let's say, happy about having a first stint of their career in a startup, because they know that it's more challenging than simply going into work for a large consultancy. So this is one way to do it. The other way to do it could also be, if you can have the, let's say, the help of an incubator, it could be easier, but you can also do it privately. Try to figure out who are the, let's say, smart professors in the university that are the ones who have much more of a following. We all know that professors sometimes are more, let's say, staid, more research-oriented, or let's say, not so cool. And then you have the other ones, especially in IT, which are the ones who really raise the challenges and do a lot of things. And these people have a lot of following because the students know they're the good professors to be with and stick with them, and that's a good thing. Finally, run hackathons. Students love these things, and professors too, because it's a good way to start projects without having the professor have to think about the project. So you deliver the challenge, the professor puts the talent, and then the things happen. Okay, so there was another question, this time by Lalit Gautam, but I think you already answered to the question. The question sounds like this: how to connect with university incubators as a foreign startup. I would like to apply, like how to get to know them also before coming to Italy, but I think you already answered to this.
We've got also websites, so you can simply go there.
And the second question by Stephanie Mitchell was, what info can you provide us about matching funds from government, which you mentioned? If I have an investor, what's the best way to receive matching funds from the government? Okay,
the matching fund mechanism was targeted at a fund of fund level. It was not matching fund at the level of individual funds. Okay, so there's not a fund that does the matching fund, except made for
There
Invitalia
was
Ventures.
not.
There was not. Now there
one.
is. It's called Invitalia Ventures. Okay, so
Yeah.
I rewind to say it properly.
Okay.
We have a fund that does match and fund kind of investment, and it's called Invitalia Ventures. So basically, they do A rounds. Okay, so if you have a private venture capitalist do it in A round, they will join in. Okay. Then the other thing that they did was match and funds at a fund of fund levels, which means anytime you approach a venture capitalist in Italy, it's very likely that they got some little bit of government money inside their fund as a GP,
Okay. And
as an LP, sorry.
and the website of Invitalia Ventures is invitaliaventures.it, so it's quite easy to find. While we wait for possible further questions, I have another one for you that I think can be of general interest. Why, in your opinion, should a startup established by a startup visa holder participate in a StartCup in Italy?
Well, you can do it basically because of the visibility that it can actually give you. It's a good way to actually put your toe in the water, see what's happening, attract, let's say, more people around it. When you're taking part, you have the juries, for instance, both at regional level and national level, are all made by entrepreneurs and investors. So it's a good way to actually be known. You don't have to, it's not mandatory, of course, but if you do it, it's something that could be helpful.
And I guess it's also a matter of networking and network capital, no? Because
Yeah,
you
of course.
get to know interesting people at startups, possible investors, etc.
Absolutely.
So, okay, thank you very much. Marco will now change speaker.